do you know when you've had an orgasm? In today's orientated sex towards orgasm, it's really important to be able to answer that question. Have you come yet? But how do we actually know? My name is Annette Bolsch, and I'm the creator of Wise Woman Sexuality YouTube channel. And I'm here to support women, particularly older women, to learn more about their sexuality and how it can be empowering as well as pleasurable. So how do we know if we've come? If you're a man, it's usually pretty easy. You just have that ejaculation and the semen, which is so obvious. And it's why the cum shot in porn is so important, because it's that visual, obvious peak of the experience. But for us as women, it can be more complicated because our experience is a lot more internal. And largely we've grown up with the Masters and Johnson representation of orgasm, which is about that tension in the body, the increasing heart rate, the engorgement of our genitals, the wetness, the hardness, and then that peak kind of explosion, and then the resolution period. But honestly, orgasms are not always like that, particularly for us as women. And there was the Kaplan model in 1979, which introduced the idea of desire as part of the orgasm cycle. But for me, even that's not complete. And we've learned more about the hormones that are involved in our pleasure, the dopamine and the oxytocin, but even that is not the whole picture. For me, a tantric perspective of orgasm is much more complete. It's also about the experience in its fullest nature. It's about pleasure, and it's about consciousness and what is our state of being. So not just the state of our body, which can be in orgasm, it can be lubricated, it may not be. We may have the contraction of the PC muscles, or we may not. We may have that explosion upwards and outwards and the euphoria that goes with it, or we may not. But it doesn't mean that we haven't had an orgasm. In Tantra, the understanding of the orgasm is really about pleasure, where there is pleasure, but pleasure that exists as energy. So not just the physical pleasure, the tingling that we get from friction, but also an energy that feels a bit like tingling, but can be more subtle and eventually becoming more intense, that actually has a life of its own, and that can come into a peak and explode outwards, but can also come to a lower peak and explode inwards, or it can become into a rolling peak, or it can be a surrender into a valley experience. We also have the psychological experience where, yes, we do have the euphoria, but we also have some kind of shift in our mental state. We end up in a different place from where we started. If we look back at how we were before our orgasmic experience and notice how we are afterwards, we're different. And we may be expanded and euphoric, but we also may be more subtly different. We may be in a more open place. We may be in a more peaceful, deeply peaceful place. We might be in a more aware place where we have understandings about ourselves, intuitive hits about ourselves, about life, about the meaning of life even. We can also have experiences of energy that are in part of our emotional energy. So we can have energy orgasms, which is like a building up and a spreading through the body of our emotional energy. We can have rage-gasms, fear-gasms, love-gasms, and we can have orgasms in other places than just our clitoris or our penis. We can have them in our hearts, in our cervix, in our solar plexus. We can have them in our armpits. We can have them anywhere. It's really about bringing that awareness, that consciousness, and that pleasure with breath and presence that brings the orgasmic process into being. So when you're thinking about have you come or not, instead of thinking of just the one particular masculine model that we have of orgasm and ejaculation, just noticing what our experience has actually been. Do we feel different from where we were? and getting in tune with the more subtle body sensations. Yes, and it doesn't mean that one orgasm is better than another. Every orgasm is worth having. So just starting to tune in with an open mind about what your orgasmic experience might be. It might even be a tuning in with the oneness of the universe. It might even be a sense of otherworldly experiences. But it really is about a coming home to ourselves in one way or another. And we can have climaxes without pelvic floor contractions. We can have orgasms that involve all of us. So next time you have an orgasm, just check in with, where did you start? Where did you finish? Did you notice that shift? And enjoy every bit of the way. And if you found benefit in this video, I'd love you to hit the like button below and subscribe so that more and more women can start to understand their sexual experience and gain more and more pleasure and more empowerment through the process.